Hey, welcome back to the Backyard Professor recorded videos. I have Colby Townsend again in the house. Colby, how are you?
Doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Good to be
I
here
uh,
again.
I am excited about this topic because it is such a difficult topic for most of us, whether it involves the Book of Mormon or not. We're going to talk. We're going to have you tell us about your new research on Isaiah in the Book of Mormon. Now, the thing that turns people off, Isaiah is big, he's clunky, it's hard to grasp his cultural context. He's back there, isn't, yeah, here, let me show my ignorance right now up front. Isn't he back there in the Assyrian? He is pre Babylonian time.
Mhm.
This was not the destruction of Babylon. That was Jeremiah that went through that disaster.
Yeah, if you're talking about the historical person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. On the chronology frame, Isaiah is
Yeah.
earlier than
Separate.
Jeremiah.
Yeah. Separate from the book. Yeah. The historical person is in the Assyrian period. Yeah. Much earlier.
And that is just not a historical era that a lot of us who are not the actual biblical scholars, such as yourself and others, study. And so it's always appeared to me to leave the impression, when I was attending church in Sunday school, I said, okay, let's open our books to Isaiah. And we'd all go, oh, this one. None of us ever got anything out of it. Yet you're claiming you have new information, a new paper on Isaiah and the Book of Mormon. So this is going to be exciting. I'm curious to see what you have. I'm not sure what you've come up with now, but everything that I've read of yours has been delightful. Everything you've talked about your research or the programs you're involved in or the books you're editing have always been well worth my time and effort. So I am ready to go. I'm excited
Okay.
for this. So take it away, my friend.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thank you. So yeah, it is a very complicated. Just in general, the issue of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon. It's a problem that scholars have been writing on for almost 100 years in academic work, master's theses and dissertations, and then articles. The articles come out more particularly in the end of the 20th century, and a couple since then have shown up. But yeah, my point in this essay, and it just barely came out a few weeks ago with Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought with the
Oh,
University.
nice. So that'll be free online.
It is, yeah, and it's up. It's available. It's on my academia page, but if people want to go to Dialogue's website to support them, that gets them more hits and all of that stuff too. So
I will put that up for you. That's his
yeah,
academia
there
page.
you go. Yeah, and it can be pretty easily found on Google if someone searches my name and then types in the robe of righteousness. That's a phrase from Third Isaiah. So we decided to use that as the title.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, the main issue that I try to address in this essay is actually scholarship on the Book of Mormon and its use of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon. So I'm not trying in the essay to claim that Isaiah is a problem in there. I'm like, no, that's the starting point. 100 years ago, scholars were already pointing out that this is a problem within the LDS tradition. Outside of the LDS tradition, everybody was pointing out that this was a problem. One of the first sort of significant academic studies of this was done by a master's student at BYU in 1938, H. Grant Vest, and the title of his master's thesis was "The Problem of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon." So really important work, and that's not 100 years ago, but it's getting close. But his
1938. So was he influenced by Sidney B. Sperry, do you know, or was
he,
Sperry influenced by him?
so he was Sperry's student. So
Oh, okay.
Sperry worked on the Isaiah in the Book of Mormon a little bit for his during his graduate work, but particularly for his master's thesis at the University of Chicago. Sperry did a thesis on Isaiah in the Book of Mormon. It didn't have a lot of analysis, and it's a pretty limited. It's a short thesis, and it's mostly quotations of texts. He didn't have a ton of in-depth commentary himself, and argumentation.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting, kind of an odd master's thesis, to be
Yeah, it
honest.
would be. I've
Yeah,
never seen it, so it might be
yeah.
something
Well,
someday.
there's his in the section where he actually writes his, about his argument. He has full pages of just quotations from the 7-volume history of the church. So
Oh wow.
it's just a lot of quotations and a lot of bulk text that he's just putting in. So it's kind of an
Probably
odd
couldn't
one.
get away with that today, could he?
No, I mean, depending on the program, I guess, but yeah, probably not exactly that. But it's been a while since I've looked at it, to be honest. I'd have to go back. But his student, though, H. Grant Vest, within about a decade after he finishes, after Sperry finishes his graduate work, he has this student, and Grant Vest does this huge analysis. It's, I think, 200 at least 200 pages, and he really digs into the details. And he was working on it with Sperry, so it was a project that Sperry wanted to see more work put into.
Right.
And Grant Vest's argument was essentially, well, if we go through and actually do this kind of analysis, we can show that the Book of Mormon, because it dates to about 600 BCE, in its earliest stories, that it is actually a textual witness for the Book of Isaiah around that time. And so he argues that the Book of Mormon should be used by historians and by biblical scholars to understand that Isaiah 48 through 54 does date to the pre-exilic period.
Oh,
Yeah. So just as a quick
that's interesting.
rundown, yeah, Isaiah 2 through 14, Isaiah 29, and Isaiah 48 through 54 are all quoted in block, like at length, in the Book of Mormon.
In the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. And the traditional way for scholars approaching this is to kind of ignore 2 through 14, because in biblical scholarship, this was already the current at the end of the 18th century, was that you have to separate Isaiah the person, the historical person, from Isaiah the book. They're two different things. And that historical person probably lived toward the end of the 8th century, beginning of the 7th century, BCE. And that person is different from Isaiah the book. The composition history of Isaiah is long and complicated.
So there's
And
more than one author.
more than one author. And so two different German scholars by the end of the 18th century had argued, and I go over this in my paper, had argued that we need to separate it into 2 books. So 1 through 39 is first Isaiah, 40 through 66 is second Isaiah, or something like that. It's just a later text. And then at the end of the 19th century, with the work of Bernhard Doom, Doom notes that we need to separate it even more. And at this point, there's a third section of the text. So instead of 40 through 66, it's actually, I think for Doom, originally he said 55 through 66, but eventually that becomes 56 through 66 has been the third Isaiah. Yeah. And so that's really crucial. But throughout all of this, scholars had actually argued that not all of 1 through 39 was Isaiah either. Chapter 1 is an introduction to the entire book. Whoever wrote chapter 1 knew the entire book, and it's as a complete whole. And there are other aspects of 1 through 39 that are problematic for just simply assigning to Isaiah of Jerusalem, that historical person. So that was always a current in the scholarship of the period, but you just have this simple, what scholars like to call a heuristic, a teaching tool, a little quick thing you can point to say, here are the 3 stages of composition that most scholars agree on: 1 through 39, 40 through 55, 56 through 66. Those chapters kind of indicate the 3 different periods that the text of Isaiah was composed within. And that's sort of been the main understanding of scholars on the Book of Mormon and Isaiah. So that, I think, this is what in my paper I sort of say, like, that
until Avraham Gileadi came along.
depends. What do you mean with that?
Well, Gileadi tried to show the entire unity in
Right.
his little book, the Apocalyptic Book of Isaiah, or the
Right.
Apocalyptic Isaiah. And then
Yeah.
he's done some other He was kicked out of Mormonism, and then he came
Mhm.
back, and he's still doing stuff on Isaiah, just not as he got in trouble for proclaiming the Messiah was going to be Davidic.
Mhm.
The prophets were going to be, yeah, he
Yeah.
emphasized David too much for the Mormons who love Joseph, the
Oh,
tribe
interesting.
of Joseph. So he
Oh,
got
okay. That's interesting.
but
Yeah.
yeah, he has tried to attempt through
Yeah.
literary allusions to show that there
Yeah.
isn't the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11
Right.
Isaiah.
Right.
There's only one. So that's what I meant.
Yeah. He and lots of others have tried to do that over the
Yeah.
years.
Yes.
And it doesn't work,
Oh, it
unfortunately.
doesn't work.
There is a certain kind of unity to the composition of bringing all of these different disparate, varying texts into one. That's why you have, whoever wrote chapter 1 it was near the end of the editing of the book. It knows the entire book, but chapter 2 begins with its own introduction to a book of Isaiah. And there are different parts of the first few chapters of Isaiah where you have these different little introductions.
How interesting.
So scholars have long noted that it's a really complicated history. I don't know exactly. Did you say Avraham Gileadi? I don't know exactly what his
He came from a
arguments are,
Jewish
but
background and he
yeah.
converted to Mormonism. And,
Mhm.
and as a Jewish scholar, he was always focused on Isaiah.
Yeah.
And the Mormons realized, hey, he likes Isaiah and we
Mhm.
suck at it. Let's get this guy in here and get him teaching and
Mhm.
writing stuff up. And he had his heyday for about 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then
Uh-huh.
he fell out, and he's back, but not nearly as prominent. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. But whatever his arguments specifically were, um, you know, uh,
detailed.
yeah, yeah. But biblical scholars have analyzed all of the different arguments for not viewing the composition history in those three different strata, those three different periods. There are a couple of scholars that don't think that there's a third Isaiah, so they just sort of say 40 through 66 was the same author. Yeah, I think even if you went with that, it's far more complicated than even that. But however it is you understand it, the general agreement, I mean, the huge majority of scholars do accept that it's really complicated, 1 through 39, 40 through 55, 56 through 66, something like that, but it's more messy than that. And um, so you have those kinds of issues. And basically, what I'm trying to point out in the essay is that I think that simple heuristic, that tool, has driven the understanding of scholars who write on Isaiah in the Book of Mormon to ignore 2 through 14, to focus on 48 through 54, and just sort of argue over there and say, well, 48 through 54 is in the Book of Mormon, so it must have originally been Isaiah. There's just this is like maybe the core or something like that, and that's
That
kind
was
of
basically Sperry's approach, if I remember right.
yeah.
It's
No,
been a while
exactly.
since I've read
Yeah.
him, but yeah.
Sperry, Ludlow, Kent
Ludlow,
Jackson,
yeah, that's
all
the
of
other one.
those.
Ludlow,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, everyone who's sort of written on this has had that kind of approach, but they've opted for kind of ignoring 2 through 14 and just saying that's fine because it's Isaiah. It's 1 through 39. What I do in this paper is to point out that those scholars that we just kind of listed off have not actually paid as much attention to biblical scholarship as they might have otherwise, and that in actually more directly engaging with biblical scholarship and really integrating it into their work, they could have avoided some of these pitfalls. So just for an example, Kent Jackson, in a recent essay in 2016 in Laura Harris Hale's Reason for Faith.
Reason for Faith, yeah.
Yeah, he
It's in here somewhere.
got it over there. Yeah. In there, he has just this passing comment after talking about, why scholars think that 40 through 55 and 56 through 66 was written by two different people at two different periods, maybe even 56 through 66, maybe even more than two people. And basically he says in passing, well, all these stylistic differences, the mentioning of different, state powers, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, those kinds of things. Like it's particularly the stylistic stuff. Like you could use that to argue that someone, that there's multiple authorship in 1 through 39. So like you could just use that at whatever. And my response in reading that, when I first read it, was that's exactly what biblical scholars do. Like that, I don't get what's going on. Like, are you not reading them? And not to say that he doesn't read it. I don't know. I'm not sure if
Welcome
he
to the
was.
party, boys.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he has or not. I don't know. I don't know what his reading practices have been. But in reading that, it seemed like a pretty big indication to me of like, okay, but that's not just a theoretical. That is exactly what scholars do. Chapters 1 and 66 are connected verbally. There's a whole bunch of like language and different other kinds of things that connect those two chapters together. So whoever wrote 66 is probably the same person that wrote chapter 1. And scholars have been in agreement about that for a long time. But whoever wrote chapter 1 didn't write chapter 2. And it gets more complicated. There's also 24 through 27 is a later text. It's written in this very similar language, very similar context as whoever wrote 33 through 35. Those were not Isaiah either. And most scholars agree that those texts, those different chapters, were written around the same time as the author of Isaiah 40 through 55, Deutero-Isaiah.
And each of these sections, Colby, are
Yeah.
dated to different times.
Yeah.
That's kind of where the problem with the Book of Mormon resides, because it's quoting earlier sections of Isaiah, and then all of a sudden you're quoting a text of Isaiah that didn't even exist in Nephi's day. There's no way he could be utilizing that, and yet he is.
No, exactly. Yeah. So to sort of highlight that a little bit more, and thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, sure.
The Book of Mormon, in the context of the Book of Mormon, the Nephi is and others are quoting from the brass plates, and those brass plates, according to the narrative, have to date before 600 BCE.
Yes.
So that was what the problem was for having Isaiah in the Book of Mormon, for H. Grant Vest, for Sidney Sperry, for everybody. And so yeah, that's really, really crucial for understanding this. But what's really important though is that there is a discrepancy between how a lot of these scholars actually engage with biblical scholarship and then apply that to the Book of Mormon's use of Isaiah. And that was really highlighted for me in that verse. Sorry, not in that verse, in that passage in Kent Jackson's essay. And so that's really crucial. I think it's super important to notice that. And even for those, like there's a lot of Mormon scholars. I think it's Jeffrey Chadwick had an article out in a collection that's in biblical studies, that written to a non-Mormon audience. And while he argues that Isaiah wrote of all of Isaiah, he still says, yeah, it's pretty clear that chapters 36 through 39 came from 2 Kings. So he's still, even in arguing that Isaiah wrote the whole book of Isaiah, he still at least says, yeah, it's very clear that 36 to 39 is not from Isaiah, that it's from 2 Kings. So even like taking
Chadwick, isn't he the one that talked about the silver metal plates being found in Jerusalem? I think he was.
I don't know. I'm not sure, to be honest. I've only engaged with his work as it pertains to this.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I'm not sure. That'd be interesting.
Well, he's a pretty established. He's a sharp cookie. I've enjoyed what I've read of his in the past.
I think this is important though, that even if
he's
someone
is
in more like in that sort of space of Mormonism, and he's a scholar, that he's still even in arguing that there's a unity in the whole book, Isaiah wrote the whole book, he still recognizes that there are strong pieces of evidence for viewing at least some of it not being written by Isaiah. Right. So 36 through 39 comes directly out of 2 Kings. So it's a really important thing there. But so what I do in the paper is to try to engage with that problem, try to address it by bringing as much of the biblical scholarship to bear on the quotations of Isaiah in the Book of Mormon as I can. by focusing on saying pretty much we need to look at 2 through 14 as well as 48 through 54. There really is no way to argue that 48 through 54 is like is a core that then, you know, in later periods got added to. That doesn't work. But even then, along with all of this, and sorry, this is so complicated, but along with all of this, along the way, lots of scholars on Isaiah and the Book of Mormon have noted for a really long time that third Isaiah isn't in the Book of Mormon, so we don't have to deal with that anyway. And in, you know, doing the process of my own work, looking at the King James Bible and the Book of Mormon, I found multiple verses in the Book of Mormon that allude to ideas and language that are unique to third Isaiah. So passages in 50.
And are you putting that in an article, or have you put that in?
That's in the article that just got published.
Oh,
yeah.
Where
So that's
was it
in there
published?
This is the same one with dialogue. The rope of righteousness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I point this
I'll be
out.
very interested in reading that.
Yeah. I point this out too and say that, you know, for a long time, scholars have said that, you know, of the Book of Mormon have said that third Isaiah is not in there. Here's a half dozen or so verses where it's very clear that language that's being used does actually come from third Isaiah. But also, it's not just those verses where there are allusions. Third Isaiah is in the block quotations. Recent scholarship has shown that either third Isaiah or a contemporary, depends on, you know, how you kind of understand that. But I follow the work of Jacob Stromberg. I think that his work on this is very meticulous and really well argued and really well written. But he argues that several passages in both chapters 48 through 54 and 2 through 14 were actually written by third Isaiah as he was editing the book and appending 56 through 66 to the end. So he accepts, like with lots of other scholars, that there are multiple authors in 56 through 66, but he argues that there's a pretty clear editor who's putting it all together, who wrote different parts of 56 through 66, who tacked it on to the end of the book, wrote chapter 1, and you get, you know, the book of Isaiah in that way. But that author editor also wrote some verses in 48 through 54 and 2 through 14. And Jacob Stromberg's advisor on his dissertation at the University of Oxford was H.G.M. Williamson. And H.G.M. Williamson, back in the 1990s, also had a study, this fantastic book. The title was The Book Called Isaiah, so it's pretty easy to find. He showed in that book the influence of the author of Deutero-Isaiah, so 40 through 55, on the writing and the composition of 1 through 39. And he showed that full chapters of 2 through 14 were written by Deutero-Isaiah.
Interesting.
So this is really important. If you're actually paying attention to, like, the best scholarship on Isaiah, 2 through 14 actually does have Deutero-Isaiah in it. So it's just as problematic as having 48 through 54. And both 48 through 54 and 2 through 14 have third Isaiah in them, or a contemporary of third Isaiah. And outside of the block quotations of the Bible and the Book of Mormon, you also do have verses that have been influenced by third Isaiah. That, you know, the robe of righteousness is a phrase that's one of them.
That's why you called your paper that. Okay, very good.
Yeah. So
that's nice touch.
Yeah. Well, it was actually the editor. I had a different title, and the editor suggested doing that. I was like, yeah, that's better. So
still a nice touch.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes editors are valuable.
No, especially the editor of dialogue. Taylor Petrie's amazing.
Oh yeah, they are good at dialogue, aren't they?
Yeah.
Gotta love those guys. And at Greg Colford Books. I'll give a thumbs up to my good friend Lloyd Erickson. He does an outstanding job at Greg Colford.
He does. So, right.
Good man. Sure. So can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
Have we found, or have you seen anyone who, we know the Dead Sea Scroll Isaiah, which very fortunately was the complete manuscript. Yeah, we get the idea of the variations and all. Did that at all change much of what the current scholarship is saying about Isaiah, or is all of this somewhat still reflected in a text that is 1,000 years older than our Masoretic text now? Did the Dead Sea Scrolls change any of this much?
Well, so this is where we get kind of into the difference of textual criticism and then sort of like composition history and source criticism and those kinds
Source
of things.
criticism, and yeah, I
In
know
100 years ago,
terms, but
yeah, 100 years ago, and it's still around, but biblical scholars really liked to distinguish these two by saying higher criticism and lower criticism.
lower criticism, right?
Yeah, lower criticism was doing things like textual criticism. Because
Textual.
over there, you're just bringing in all the manuscripts, comparing them all, finding the variants, all of that kind of stuff. So we do have more
redaction criticism and form criticism. Hey, baby, that's where it's at.
That's the higher criticism. Yeah. So
right.
over there, you're actually giving, specific interpretation about the history of the writing. You're doing that sort of, process and work, and revising our understanding and updating. Updating is probably a better word. Updating our understanding of the text and, when it was written, who it might have been written by, those kinds of things. So in that sense, no, that didn't shift anything. Scholars have continued viewing it the way that they view it. There is an interesting gap between, I believe it's chapters 33 and 34. So some scholars have pointed that out and said, maybe anciently there was sort of an indication that there was a difference between this earlier material and this later material. Scholars aren't exactly sure what to do with that. Some say that that doesn't have any significant meaning. So it kind of depends. I'm not sure exactly, with that, but
nothing earth-shaking though.
Yeah, but as far as like lower criticism, just understanding the meaning of the text, understanding its history, understanding all the variance between the manuscripts in that area, yes. The Dead Sea Scrolls have made, a massive contribution.
I'm aware of that. Yeah.
Right.
I was just thinking on the large front with taking blocks
of
different authors. I wasn't aware that the Dead Sea Scroll text of Isaiah actually had much of an impact in that. But I know the textual criticism, there are some really interesting, both from Margaret Barker on the Mother of God there and James Tabor on the two Messiahs. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not really too familiar with that. I know like the
we'll I'll introduce
problematic. Yeah. But as far as like just scholars that are working through like Donald Perry is one, within the
he is, and he's very good.
Yeah, and he just had a really important volume come out that tracks all of the textual variants. I think it was out with Brill. Really expensive book, but really important contribution to the study of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So yeah, in that sense, super important. There was the Great Isaiah Scroll, the one Qumran Isaiah A. There are also multiple others. Just that one is important because it, like you said, it's the full thing. So that's pretty rare.
It is
for those, but yeah, we have multiple we have multiple manuscripts and lots of fragments from those manuscripts of Isaiah. So yeah, and like you said, it takes us 1,000 years back, from the earliest manuscripts that we had before the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they are incredibly important for understanding the history of the text.
Yeah, it's so important at the Shrine of the Book. I've seen pictures. I've never seen it yet, but they have a duplicate. It's not the original, of course not, but of the entire Great Scroll of Isaiah in a circle around. You can walk, if you know how to read the Hebrew, you can walk around it and read the Book of Isaiah. Yeah, I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
When I go to Israel, that's going to be the first thing I do is go to that Shrine of the Book.
Yeah. No, for sure. Right. Yeah.
So it sounds to me like you are encouraging the continued, or at least picking up and beginning to, would I be out of line if I said you're suggesting that they come up to snuff with the actual biblical scholarship and begin acknowledging it and moving forward from that point.
Yeah.
Now let's understand too, and I think we both know. I think the audience will grasp this point too. That one of the I'm going to call it a downside. I'm not going to call it a defect, but I've been pretty harsh since not remaining an apologist on some areas, but and I'm toning down somewhat. But there, every now and then, there's an anger phase that comes up because of the stupidity taken on some social issues that the church keeps doing that just drive the rest of us nuts. Come on, you act like you're three blind mice, not a grand presidency. But this idea that the scholars at BYU, yes, they're on a leash. I'll put it that way. That's the most charitable way I can put it. And I hope it's changing a little bit. I do believe the Joseph Smith papers have helped the church leadership see the value of dropping Boyd K. Packer's approach to the history. He's dead and gone. Okay, good. Now let's get going here. I think rather than constraining the scholars at BYU to have to arrive at a conclusion, I'm hoping that they will be able to just begin utilizing the evidence and the other scholars and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel again. Follow what the scholars are doing. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping that's going to happen. I believe part of this vision, the Joseph Smith papers, is going to help that along. Would I be wrong in saying that?
I think that's definitely right. Yeah. And just to
kind of put fantastic people in with the Joseph Smith papers, I'll tell you.
They have. Yeah. And just to kind of just to point out there maybe like a tiny update to what you just said, a little revision to what you just said, is that there are scholars at BYU who do important work with this issue. It's just that up to this point, they do recognize that biblical scholarship has pointed out like having 48 through 54 is a problem. So they have engaged it there. They haven't been as explicit for their audience, right? But they've assumed that 2 through 14 was fine. It's just we don't have to do anything there. So that's kind of the big thing that I'm pointing out is that 2 through 14 should be viewed the same as 48 through 54.
Maybe you'll help them
having that full block of text straight 2 through 14 in the Book of Mormon is just as problematic as far as the history goes as 48 through 54. So just inviting other scholars working on this issue to do that kind of work, to say, okay, 2 through 14 actually is an issue. In the paper, I don't say this is a consensus of scholarship, so that's it. I actually dig into the reasons why scholars view all of the things as being written later.
Good.
So I explain the reasons. I actually get into the arguments. Yeah. And so that way too, I mean, it's one thing to point out, oh, well, scholars have a consensus over this issue. Okay. Why? Teach us, like that. Yeah. Let's actually get into the reasons. And
okay, big deal.
yeah. Like it's not enough to just sort of say, well, all scholars think this. And that's what's fun about this. In several areas in several parts of my essay, I do point out where the scholars disagree, where one will actually say, no, this does come from Isaiah for these different reasons. And then these others, I sometimes I say, well, but that argument doesn't actually engage with what the other scholars are saying. And they say this, and that's why this other thing makes more sense to me. Right. So
I'm glad you did it that way. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So, not shying away from any of that. It's just like we've talked about, up to this point, like including all of these different kinds of voices, including all the different kinds of arguments, and then sort of going through those in detail and saying, okay, this is what actually makes sense the most to me over here.
Oh, this must be a pretty big paper. How big is your paper?
Well, it was bigger originally. It's 31, 32 pages in print.
Oh, so you had a chance to expound a bit. Okay, good.
Yeah. But originally it was 12,500 words and it was cut down to 7,500. So
well, you can do a second paper then
maybe. I mean, it's all that stuff was very much part of this paper. So I don't know. But yeah, 5,000 words were cut off. So almost half.
That's a lot of editing, man.
Yep. And really good editing again, with dialogue. They
Yeah,
do a fantastic
I
job.
know. Well, the editors know
Yeah.
better than us because it's
Yeah.
our work. We want it all out there. The public will love this.
Yeah.
That's kind of like me saying, I can produce 11-hour videos nonstop, real good for me, but who's going to watch it?
Right. Well, and with that
The
one, it would have,
audiences love much more the half-hour chunks if they can get them.
yeah. And I think my paper would have been something like 50 pages instead of, just over 30. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It sounds fascinating. I
Yeah.
am
Thanks.
really looking forward to it. I continually, I'm going back to your academia page, and I'm just continually finding stuff that you've written or that you've been involved in, and I'll download it or take a look at the PDF.
Mhm.
And I know this is not a complaint, and I'm not encouraging people to take my stance toward academia.edu that I am, but I am not overly rich. Their price is good. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying sometimes it gets a little annoying when they keep saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, get the full version, get the full
Right.
version. Oh, you've been mentioned. We'll let you see it if you'll get update
Yeah.
to." And I'm
Yeah.
going, let me see the damn citation. I want to see who's saying what.
Right.
I'm a tightwad, so I've got to get
Yeah.
them.
There are ways around it. It's kind of funny, but if you get the email that says, "Hey, you've been mentioned in a paper," if you look at the title of the email, it'll have the name of the person. So you can reverse engineer that and go to Google and type in that name and then your name, and you can sometimes find it. So it's funny. I've been on academia long enough that it was owned by a different company before, and it
Oh,
wasn't corporate. And when they made that switch, I sent an email and complained, like this is for like we are not like a market.
yeah,
Like this is
right.
not a great idea. It's not a good
That
model.
that
And
being said, I do love the phenomenal research that's available through it, though. Oh
yes, yeah.
wow,
So we
it's
just kind of have to exist in that, and dodge all of those little things saying this is the cheapest it'll be ever, and then you get another email 3 months later. This is the cheapest it'll be ever. It's like, no, not really. Yeah.
yeah, they keep giving me ads. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
everybody's got to make. I mean, man, even Wikipedia now is starting to put up blurbs. Please donate. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I ask the same thing. So, it is a time where we
Yeah.
all need help, and we do appreciate it. We're not
Mhm.
getting filthy, flipping rich on this stuff. I promise, but
Yeah.
it is just so delightful for us to learn, and it is just so much fun to have you who learn 10 times more than we do come on and share your wonderful ideas. So we appreciate it, and I am looking forward to having you on the show again and again and again through time. In the meantime, I'm going to speak for my audience to you here, Colby. I know every one of them wish you the very best, as I do, because you're a little ways away from your PhD, but we do know you can do that. So, and anything we can do to help you, please let us know. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
this is an exciting time to have you in the PhD program because and again, it's from my perspective, but you are truly a breath of fresh air. And I have seriously good scholarly friends who seriously respect you already. And that's, Brian Hauglid, Dan Vogel, and Dr. Charlie Hare. Every one of them, when they heard I was having you on, just, oh, Colby Townsend, he's awesome. So don't let that swell your head. Don't get arrogant,
Okay.
but you are appreciated, is my point, from
Thank
all
you.
scholars.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Our very good pleasure. And in the meantime, you guys remember we are having fun bringing you all this wonderful stuff. And I have truly boatloads more that I will be producing over the course of the next 100 or so years. So stick around and keep watching. I will try to produce something weekly. Seems pretty good. Sometimes I get away with doing stuff twice a week. With my videos, I can do 200 of them a week if I can find the time. On my live sessions, I try to keep it to once a week. Sometimes I'll get twice a week. So just keep your eyes on us. And we will continue providing you fun, interesting, entertaining, and learning videos, which is what we are all after, because this, it appears to us, is the stuff that has been kept from us or hidden from us, and we are rebelling by using our minds now, and it's the greatest joy we have. Kind of a sarcastic way to put it, but I'm not even kidding. That is what we love to do. So we will see all of you guys next time. Love y'all. We got to go.